And, and this was such an incredible achievement at the time that we all thought that there was no way that it would ever, no matter what happened, be beaten. Inconceivable for someone to win more than 10 TTs. And Stanley Woods didn't just win it on one make of bike. He won for Norton, he won for Moto Guzzi, and he won for Velocet. So 3 takes a bike in the 350 and the 500cc categories. And certainly one of the most exciting TT races of all time, which I was lucky enough to be at, was the battle between Stanley Woods on a V-twin Italian Moto Guzzi and Jimmy Guthrie, Norton single-cylinder works rider in 1935. And Stanley won it by a combination of skill, guile, and a magnificent motorcycle. To say that we weren't used to a foreign motorcycle winning the TT is a masterpiece of understatement, and we certainly weren't used to one winning the senior TT, which is the blue ribbon. So Guthrie and Stanley Woods had a titanic battle all the way through the race, and at the start of the last lap but one, Stanley Woods' pit attendant leant out of the pit holding a petrol can, which was a sign that he got to come in and refuel. So Jimmy Guthrie started the last lap of the race ahead of Stanley Woods, with the Norton management believing that Stanley Woods was going to come in and refuel and therefore lose the race. And they had a signalling station at a place called Stella Maris, which is at Ramsey at the start of the climb of the mountain. And they held out a signal to Jimmy Guthrie for him to take it easy, or comparatively easy. They didn't tell him why, but they thought it was because Stanley Woods had no intention of stopping at all, and he didn't stop. And he rode through and did that fast lap, and he won by 4 seconds. Now, that was an incredible achievement. But I say Stanley was one of these people who had this brilliant ability to get on any motorcycle and ride it very quickly indeed. And to win for Velocet as he did, to win for Norton as he did, to win for Moto Guzzi as he did, was an unparalleled achievement. I think he might have been able to go on after the war, but the gap between 39 and 47 was too much. But we always used to see him at the TT, and he was regarded as a demigod. Another one of the pre-war riders, and actually one of the riders who successfully reappeared after the war, was Freddie Frith, who was a sort of latter-day Jimmy Guthrie, because he was very quiet and didn't make a fuss. He came from Grimsby, didn't make a fuss about anything, but got on the bike and rode it like a genius, and he was a Norton Works rider. During the war, he became an army motorcycle instructor for dispatch riders at a school which my father founded, and he came back after the war and was world champion in 1947. Just before the war, Hitler was extremely keen that Germany should show its superiority in his eyes in all walks of life, and especially sport. And in four-wheeled sport, it was the Mercedes-Benz and Auto Unions, and in two-wheeled sport, it was the BMWs. And just before the few years before the war, BMW entered the TT with people like Jock West, the Englishman, who knew the TT course very well. But in 1939, George Meyer won the senior TT, which was the creme de la creme, the blue ribbon of the TT meeting, on a 500cc supercharged BMW. And that really was a massive event, because it was the first time that a Continental had won the senior TT. We had had foreign bikes winning TT races, but we'd never had a foreign rider on a foreign bike winning the senior TT. In the war years, there wasn't any racing. The Manx Grand Prix was held in 1946. Now, the Manx Grand Prix is in effect the amateur TT, and they managed to get one going in 1946. And I actually got leave from my regiment in Germany to come over to the Isle of Man and see a very wild Irishman called Ernie Lyons winning on a twin-cylinder Triumph. But then the TT really came back in 1947, and that was Norton were the top team, as they had been before the war, in the 500cc class and the 350 class with Velocet. And they came back after the war, and Harold Daniel, the bald-headed, bespectacled South Londoner who looked more like a taxi driver than a motorcycle racer, let alone a TT winner, rode for Norton and famously won the 1947 TT. And then you got, in my opinion, and I know I'm biased, the golden years of the TT, because it built up from 1947 over the next 10 years absolutely brilliantly. Norton were top of the heap with people like Harold Daniel, Artie Bell, the Irish rider, a great friend of mine, who won the TT. Johnny Lockett, who was part of the Norton team. But then the real turning point was in 1950, when Jeff Duke, who had won the Manx Grand Prix on a Norton in 1949, took part in the TT races in the 350 and the 500 on the world famous Featherbed Norton. Now, the Featherbed Norton has got a fascinating history. At that time, people like Bell and Harold Daniel were riding what they call the old Garden Gate Norton, because it had a frame like a garden gate, bits of tubing welded together, and not the best handling. And I had a friend called Rex McCandless, who was an Irishman and a friend of Artie Bell's, who was a brilliant engineer and a racer, and his brother, Crummy, subsequently rode with great success in the TT for Norton and for Gilera. Rex McCandless designed a frame and persuaded Gilbert Smith, who was the managing director of Norton, and Joe Craig, who was the technical chief of Norton, to see Artie Bell riding a Garden Gate Norton against Crummy McCandless riding a McCandless framed bike with a Triumph engine. And McCandless was quicker than Artie Bell, which was unbelievable. And as a result of that, Norton switched their whole range to use this special frame. And in 1950, Jeff Duke, this fresh-faced, handsome young chap who was the idol of the girls and the fans as well, won the senior TT on a Featherbed Norton. And I've talked about my father wearing big, bulky, heavy racing leathers. Jeff Duke was so insistent that every aspect of what he did was right to enable him to get the maximum performance out of the bike, that he dispensed with the bulky leathers they used to wear and got a glove maker, a friend of his, to make a one-piece pair of leathers with a zipper up the front out of glove fabric, very thin indeed, but minimum wind resistance. And I will never forget watching Jeff Duke start the senior TT on the Featherbed Norton, which was a bike beyond everybody's and beliefs about what could be done. In his racing suit, and he was flat on the tank long before he'd reached the top of Bray Hill, and he subsequently went on to have an absolutely brilliant career. Jeff Duke's a great friend of mine, and I have enormous respect and admiration for him. I really feel rather sorry for him, because he had a wonderful career with Norton, world champion, winner of the TT. And then, round about 1955, he became a works rider for Gilera, who had these brilliant four-cylinder Italian machines, in a situation where he really had no choice. He would have wanted to carry on racing for and riding Nortons, British, but Nortons were no longer, sadly, good enough. They were being beaten by the Continental bikes in general, and Gilera and MV in particular. So when Gilera said, come and join us, to Jeff, he had very little choice from an income point of view and also from a success point of view. But he had great success with Gilera, with the TT and world champion. But then in 1957, Gilera and MV and Guzzi and all the rest of the big works teams pulled out of racing. And there was really nothing left for Jeff to ride. He had a brief spell with BMW, but it didn't suit him and it didn't suit his style. And his career more or less petered out. And it was far too short because he had so much talent. And like so many TT riders and motorcycle racers, a really lovely person. Quiet, extremely modest, came to life when he got on a motorcycle, and in my opinion, the greatest stylist on a motorcycle of all time. He was poetry in motion. From 1947 until 1957 were, in my opinion, the golden years. And in 1957, it sadly started to come to, I won't say a juddering halt, but the success of the TT slowed up. In 1957, which was the peak year, we had works machines from, and these are just the ones I can remember, from Norton, from Velocet, from MV with four-cylinder bikes, with Gilera four-cylinder bikes, for Jawa, the Czechoslovakian company, NSU, the German 250, Mondial, a whole range of absolutely top bikes of the day, works machines with works riders, V8 Moto Guzzi with Dickie Dale riding it, incredible. We had this wonderful race at which Bob McIntyre on the four-cylinder Gilera became the first person ever to do an official 100-mile-an-hour lap in the TT. Jeff Duke, the year before on a Gilera, had done 99.99 or 99.96. Now, the timing wasn't as sophisticated as it is with today's electronic stuff, and I have always felt that it was bitter gall for Jeff to have got so close, but officially not quite to have done it. But Bob McIntyre won the TT in '57 on the Gilera. I was commentating from Craignabar at the time, and one of my all-time top memories of the TT is watching Bob McIntyre on the Gilera and John Surtees on the four-cylinder MV come out of the left-hander at Kate's Cottage and drop down the hill towards Craignabar, the commentary position, and then they accelerated round the right-hand corner down to Brandish Corner, and that's the fastest part of the TT course. And with their two four-cylinder machines, they were changing up at marginally different times. So you had this marvellous four-cylinder note echoing all the way down from Craignabar down to Brandish, and it was an amazing experience.